Some names and details in this story have been changed to protect the anonymity and privacy of those involved. Not all of the photos were taken at the crime scene.
Red Rock National Conservation Area in Nevada is a place where the pristine beauty of crimson cliffs meets deadly danger. Every year, the unforgiving desert claims the lives of those who have underestimated its scorching sun and treacherous labyrinthine canyons. When a young woman vanished without a trace on one of the most challenging trails, the police and her relatives considered it yet another tragedy caused by the harsh wilderness. But when she was found alive exactly 1 year later, chained to a rusty pipe in an abandoned underground bunker, the whole country called it a true miracle. Nenah Lee looked like the perfect victim. Incredibly exhausted, psychologically broken, the girl clutched a rusty metal box containing her tormentor's gruesome trophies in a death grip. But sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden not in the cold shadows of the canyon, but behind the tear-stained eyes of the one everyone had so desperately rushed to save. The morning of May 12th, 2015, began quite normally. According to the official report from the Las Vegas Police Department, at 7:15 a.m., 24-year-old Nenah Lee left her rented apartment in the quiet residential neighborhood of Summerlin. Surveillance cameras at a gas station on West Charleston Boulevard captured her car at 7:32 a.m. The black and white footage clearly shows Nenah pulling her dark blue Ford Escape SUV up to the second gas pump. Investigators reconstructed her subsequent actions in detail, literally minute by minute. At 7:35 a.m., the woman entered the gas station convenience store. During an official interview, the cashier later testified that she behaved completely calmly, showing no signs of anxiety, fear, or haste. Nenah purchased a set of spare batteries for a camping flashlight and a large cup of black coffee. After paying in cash, she got behind the wheel and at 7:40 a.m. confidently headed west toward Red Rock National Conservation Area. Upon arriving, she left her car in a remote gravel parking lot in the park. At 8:15 a.m., she personally made an entry in the visitor logbook near the wooden information stand. Nenah indicated Icebox Canyon as her route. Among local rescuers, this trail had an unspoken reputation as a cursed route. It was notorious for its extremely difficult, treacherous terrain, steep elevation changes, and narrow rock corridors where direct sunlight almost never penetrated. The alarm was raised that evening. At 7 p.m., as the park rangers on duty were conducting their mandatory evening patrol of the grounds before the trails closed completely, they noticed a lone dark blue Ford Escape. It was still parked in the completely empty gravel lot. According to the park's internal safety protocol, staying on the hiking trails after sunset was strictly prohibited. The rangers checked the guest book, identified the car's owner, and waited another hour. When Nenah Lee did not show up at 8 p.m., a large-scale search and rescue operation was immediately launched. Officers from the Las Vegas Police Department were quickly joined by dozens of trained volunteers from the Red Rock Search and Rescue Service. A command center was set up right next to the missing woman's car. The search continued throughout the night. Police helicopters, equipped with highly sensitive thermal imaging cameras, methodically combed every square foot of the narrow Icebox Canyon. Ground teams were at work. K-9 units with service dogs searched the wild, rugged terrain, stretching for dozens of miles into the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest. The tension mounted with every passing hour. Nighttime temperatures in the desert plummeted to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, while during the day, the rocks heated up to 110 degrees, turning the canyon into a veritable trap. The dogs constantly lost the trail on the hard, rocky terrain. The eerie silence of the forest was broken only by the hum of helicopter rotors and the shouts of rescuers, which were lost without a trace in the deafening echo of the rocks. The turning point came on the third day of continuous searching, May 15th. A search party surveying the northern slope of Icebox Canyon made a discovery. At the very edge of an extremely steep rocky cliff, over 200 feet high, lay an abandoned hiking backpack. Family members confirmed it belonged to Nenah Lee. Forensic experts immediately cordoned off the perimeter with yellow tape. During a thorough visual inspection, they noted one detail. The backpack's right shoulder strap was broken, as if it had snapped under the weight or a sudden jerk. However, absolutely nothing was found in the vicinity that could explain the tragedy. Not a single drop of blood on the sharp rocks. No signs of a struggle. No footprints from someone else's shoes or broken branches from the bushes. The backpack simply lay at the edge of the precipice. Rescuers' descents on climbing ropes to the very bottom of the canyon yielded no results. No body was found there. Days turned into weeks. After 21 days of exhausting and fruitless searches, when the daytime temperature in the desert became critical and posed a direct threat to the lives of the searchers themselves, official large-scale operations were completely scaled back. The Las Vegas Police Department held a press conference to announce their final verdict. 24-year-old Nenah Lee was officially declared missing. The investigation concluded that the young woman had been the victim of a tragic accident in the rugged terrain. The case file was shelved in the archives of unsolved disappearances, and the desert went on with its life. None of the rescuers or detectives at the time could even imagine that the canyon was merely a flawless theatrical backdrop. After all, in this perfect story of a tragic death, there was one small detail that the forensic experts documented but could not explain. The sturdy nylon strap of the backpack found at the edge of the precipice had not been torn by the fall or friction against the rocks. Its edges were perfectly smooth, as if they had been deliberately cut with an extremely sharp knife blade. May 12th, 2016. Exactly 1 year had passed since the day Las Vegas bid farewell to a tourist whose name had vanished into the desert. Red Rock National Conservation Area continued to live its usual life, indifferent to human tragedies. That morning, the weather was typical for late spring. The thermometer was climbing relentlessly, promising temperatures over 90 degrees Fahrenheit by noon. Two experienced rock climbers, who knew these cliffs by heart, decided to train away from the popular trails. According to their later accounts, they deliberately veered off the marked routes. Their goal was the wild, steep sections at the very foot of the Bridge Mountain Massif. This area was located near the old Blue Diamond Quarry, a site that had been used for gypsum mining decades ago and had since become a wasteland. The distance from the nearest road was at least 4 miles of rough terrain. Making their way through thick thickets of prickly desert scrub at an elevation of about 4,000 feet, the men focused on finding new climbing points. An eerie forest silence reigned all around. Suddenly, amid a chaotic pile of boulders, one of the climbers noticed a detail completely out of place in this landscape. At ground level, half buried in solid rock, a massive metal door was visible. It was covered in a thick layer of rust and years of grime, blending so perfectly into the landscape that it was nearly impossible to spot from even 20 feet away. Just above the top edge of the frame, through the scratches, the faded letters of a stenciled inscription were barely legible. The climber stepped closer and was able to make out the words in English. Redstone Technical Storage. It was an old bunker, a remnant of an industrial past. The men were about to move on, assuming it was just another abandoned structure, when suddenly they froze. From beneath the heavy metal door, through the thickness of concrete and steel, a sound echoed. It was a muffled, but perfectly clear and rhythmic tapping. Someone was hitting the metal with something hard from the inside. In this deserted place, such a sound triggered a rush of adrenaline. According to reports, the climbers didn't waste time trying to get a cell signal in the gorge. A padlock hung on the door, firmly jammed with rust. One of the men pulled a heavy mountaineering ice axe from his gear. It took about 10 strikes before the steel shackle of the lock finally snapped. With a chilling screech, the door slowly swung outward, releasing a breath of icy, musty cold and a sharp smell of dampness into the scorching desert air. The climbers turned on their flashlights and cautiously stepped into the dimness of the damp room. A beam of light cut through the thick darkness and came to rest in the far corner of the dungeon. On the floor, on an incredibly dirty, moisture-soaked mattress, sat a person. It was a girl, so emaciated and covered in a layer of dried mud that her gaunt face looked like a gray mask. The flashlight beam slid lower, illuminating a detail that made the blood run cold in their veins. The girl's left ankle was tightly chained with a thick steel chain to a massive water pipe protruding from the concrete wall. The metal had scraped the skin on her leg almost down to the bone. But the greatest shock was not this scene of captivity at all. When one of the climbers cautiously approached her, he suddenly recognized those facial features that had been on the front pages of Nevada newspapers a year ago. It was Nenah Lee, the girl whom all of Las Vegas had considered hopelessly dead for 365 days, was sitting before them, alive. She was trembling uncontrollably, cowering in a ball from the bright light of the flashlights and the footsteps of strangers. Her gaze was wild, frightened, and completely detached, as if she had long since lost any connection to reality. The rescuers slowly tried to approach her to visually examine her wounds, but the girl suddenly recoiled against the concrete wall, making a dull thud. Only then did the men notice that her mangled hands were not empty. Even in a state of extreme exhaustion, Nenah Lee clutched a small, rusty metal box with a death grip. She pressed it to her chest so tightly that the knuckles on her fingers turned white. When one of the climbers reached out, trying to take the dirty object away to finally free the girl, Nenah screamed. It was a scream of utter terror. She categorically refused to hand the mysterious box over to strangers, defending it with such obsession as if something far more terrifying than her own death were hidden inside. Friends, before we continue diving into this chilling story, I sincerely ask you to do one important thing. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment. YouTube's algorithms are designed so that your activity helps promote investigations like this, and thanks to your support, the video will reach a much wider audience. Your engagement allows the channel to thrive and uncover new mysteries. Now let's return to the mysterious Nevada desert. The girl found in the dark dungeon was urgently evacuated by rescue helicopter to the Sunset Valley Clinic for emergency medical care. News of her incredible rescue spread like wildfire across the country, literally dominating national news broadcasts. In a hospital room, hooked up to numerous medical monitors, Nenah Lee gave her first statement. According to official police transcripts, the girl told detectives, "In a week, barely audible voice, a story that made their blood run cold. She claimed that exactly 1 year ago, on a remote hiking trail, she was suddenly attacked by a stranger. Nenah described him as a very burly man whose face was completely concealed by a black tactical mask. Without a word or warning, the attacker injected a powerful sedative into her neck. When the girl came to, she was already locked in a damp concrete bunker, and her left leg was chained tightly with a heavy steel chain to a massive water pipe. According to her, the mysterious kidnapper appeared in the abandoned bunker exactly once a week, bringing cheap canned food and a few gallons of drinking water. Nenah assured investigators that during all those long 365 days of harsh captivity, he never once removed his mask or uttered a single word. Absolute silence and terrifying isolation became her worst daily torments. American society was deeply shocked by this cruelty. Concerned people from all states donated money en masse to specially created charitable funds to support Nenah. Within days, the total amount of donations reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. Absolutely everyone wanted to help the girl, who had survived a true hell underground, return to a normal life as quickly as possible. In the eyes of the public, she became an unquestionable national symbol of resilience. However, while the entire country blindly sympathized with the victim, Mark Harris, a lead detective with the Criminal Investigation Department, sat in his office and meticulously studied the medical reports from the Sunset Valley Clinic. Harris was an investigator who was accustomed to trusting not the emotions of the crowd, but exclusively documented facts. And it was precisely these medical facts that began to paint a completely illogical and contradictory picture of the crime. Carefully studying the doctor's official findings, the experienced detective noticed critical discrepancies. The doctors had indeed documented severe weight loss and dehydration in the patient. However, the physiological analysis revealed something that did not fit medical norms in any way. The muscle mass in the girl's legs had not atrophied to the critical stage that is physiologically inevitable after a full year of continuous confinement on a short chain. To maintain such muscle tone, a person would have had to walk regularly or perform physical exercises, which was absolutely impossible under the conditions of the brutal captivity she described. The second significant anomaly concerned her overall state of health. Despite the horrifying accounts of the dreadful unsanitary conditions in the old dungeon and the meager diet consisting exclusively of cheap canned food, Nenah's teeth were in perfect condition. Specialists found absolutely no signs of scurvy or critical vitamin deficiency, which are inevitable and typical consequences of such prolonged starvation and a complete lack of direct sunlight. But the most important fact, which categorically would not leave the detective alone, was hidden in the subtle details. Mark Harris spent hours under a magnifying glass examining high-quality photographs of the girl's hands, taken by forensic experts, immediately after her arrival at the hospital ward. Her pale skin showed no trace of the characteristic deep calluses, old scars, or specific bloody abrasions. Every experienced investigator knows full well. Detective Harris silently set aside the thick folder containing the medical report and shifted his gaze to the board with the photographs. He realized one chilling thing. This girl, for whom all of America now felt sincere sympathy, had desperately and cold-bloodedly lied to the police. Her own body told a story that was radically different from the tragic tale that had brought millions of people to tears. She was definitely hiding something far more horrific than the story of a masked maniac. And the detective understood that the only way to find out the real truth was to look inside that very rusty metal box, which she had so frantically and aggressively protected from the rescuers from the very first moment of her miraculous rescue. On May 20th, 8 days after the sensational evacuation from the underground bunker, investigators from the Las Vegas Police Department finally obtained an official court order. This legal document granted them the unquestionable right to forcibly open and conduct a full forensic examination of that very rusty metal box. Nenah Lee categorically refused to hand it over voluntarily. Even while in a secure hospital room under round-the-clock armed guard, she hid the box under her pillow, breaking into full-blown hysterics and panic attacks at the slightest attempt by nurses or police officers to take this filthy object away. According to the documented interrogation transcripts that the girl provided to lead detective Mark Harris, this box was the most brutal instrument of sophisticated psychological torture. With tears in her eyes, Nenah claimed that a silent, burly man wearing a black tactical mask had brought this box to her during the second month of her underground confinement. According to her, the kidnapper suddenly threw the cold metal onto her dirty mattress and, with rough gestures, forced her to unlock it. She recounted that the maniac forced her to stare at the box's gruesome contents for hours every day. It was his silent message, a constant psychological reminder that she was just another powerless plaything, and that very soon she was guaranteed to become the next in this collection of dead souls. The box was delivered under heavy guard to the Nevada State Police's main forensic laboratory. The opening procedure took place under completely sterile conditions and was continuously recorded by several police video cameras from various angles. An experienced forensic technician in a white protective suit carefully secured the box on a cold metal table. Using a special miniature cutting tool, he carefully cut through the old, heavily corroded padlock. The air in the spacious laboratory seemed to grow heavier instantly as the lid slowly swung back with a quiet metallic grind. What lay inside the rusty metal made the officers present hold their breath. This was not merely a sick attempt to intimidate a captive. Before them lay a genuine, meticulously compiled archive of an unknown serial killer. The forensic experts began methodically using sterile medical tweezers to retrieve and carefully lay out the gruesome trophies on the white table. The first discovery was 3 plastic driver's licenses. They belonged to completely different people, but they were united by one extremely terrifying fact. The police database instantly confirmed that all 3 citizens were officially listed as missing in the state's endless deserts. The first document belonged to a lone tourist who vanished without a trace in the Death Valley area in the spring of 2012. The second and third documents belonged to a young couple of travelers whose abandoned SUV was found near Red Rock Canyon in August 2014. Their bodies were never found during the search operations. Next, the experts retrieved a worn men's wristwatch with a broken leather strap, a silver chain, and several faded paper receipts from local gas stations. But the most chilling item in the underground collection turned out to be a stack of 5 Polaroid photos, carelessly taped together with ordinary clear office tape. These photographs captured the very same missing tourists. The shots were taken in extremely poor lighting, but the people's faces, contorted by sheer terror, were clearly recognizable. They had been photographed in similar concrete underground settings, firmly chained with massive chains. Detective Harris, who was watching the process through the glass, felt an unpleasant chill. The Las Vegas Police Department held in their hands irrefutable evidence of the existence of a predator who had been hunting with complete impunity on the region's tourist trails for years. There was only one final step left: to find biological traces of the masked maniac on these preserved items. Each item was placed in a special airtight chamber to detect hidden fingerprints. Genetic experts began a meticulous examination of every surface, searching for microscopic particles of skin or sweat. The next morning, a thick sealed envelope containing the lab results landed on Mark Harris's desk. The detective expected to find the genetic profile of an adult male, which would finally lead the police to the elusive killer. But what he read in the official report completely turned the entire investigation on its head. The lab report was absolutely unequivocal and left no room for doubt. Forensic experts found not a single foreign fingerprint on any of the items. Not a single DNA molecule belonging to the hypothetical Burley kidnapper was detected. The surfaces of the plastic ID cards, the cold metal of the watch, and the glossy photographs were crystal clear of any traces of third parties. No one else had ever touched these items, but they were by no means empty. The entire contents of the rusty metal box were literally littered with fingerprints. However, all of them, without a single exception, belonged to just one person: Nenah Lee herself. Modern fingerprinting methods allowed forensic experts to determine the age of the traces with high precision. The report clearly stated that the objects bore both the girl's completely fresh fingerprints, left in the weeks leading up to her rescue, and very old prints that had deeply embedded themselves in the material structure many months ago. The final devastating blow to the perfect kidnapping story came from a chemical analysis of the Polaroid photos. To hold them together, someone had used a piece of tape. Experts in the lab carefully peeled the adhesive tape away from the photographic paper and examined its inner sticky layer. Right there, where it was absolutely impossible to touch accidentally after gluing and where biological traces are perfectly preserved, they discovered an extremely clear, smudge-free thumbprint from the right hand. This print undoubtedly belonged to Nenah Lee. She herself had carefully glued these gruesome photographs together. She herself had assembled this box long before rescuers found it. Detective Harris silently stared at the police photos of the young woman, recalling her tear-filled eyes during the interrogation. The picture of the serial crimes had changed dramatically. The person who had carefully preserved the driver's licenses of the dead travelers had never been a defenseless victim. The Las Vegas police no longer needed to search for a phantom masked sadist among the Red Rock cliffs. The detective already knew exactly whose face was hidden behind that mask. But now an even more difficult and far more terrifying task lay ahead of him. The findings from the crime lab proved to be the turning point that forever and irrevocably changed the course of this convoluted case. After forensic experts confirmed that absolutely all the fingerprints on the gruesome trophies belonged exclusively to the victim herself, the focus of the investigation shifted radically. The mythical burly sadist in a black tactical mask had vanished into thin air, turning out to be a masterful illusion, cold-bloodedly created to divert the police's attention. Now Nenah Lee found herself at the very center of the law enforcement radar. Lead detective of the Criminal Division, Mark Harris, ordered an immediate and thorough review of all available information regarding the girl's life prior to her disappearance in the spring of 2015. The investigators were interested in absolutely everything: her past relationships, education, place of employment, and bank account balances. The initial results of the in-depth background check yielded startling discoveries for the police. It turned out that the young woman, whom the national press had labeled a simple, naive tourist, actually had a very specific and specialized profession. For the past 3 years, Nenah had officially worked as a senior archivist at the private Canyon Crest Historical Foundation. This modest position gave the young woman a golden key to the deepest secrets of the entire mountain region. A forensic analysis of her old hard drive, which had miraculously survived in an apartment in the Summerlin area, revealed a startling picture. The Cybercrime Division successfully recovered deeply deleted files and system access logs. According to the expert's official report, for years, Nenah had full, unrestricted access to municipal blueprints, classified geological reports, and restricted topographic maps. Hundreds of detailed diagrams of abandoned Gold Rush-era mines, engineering drawings of old underground ventilation systems, and decommissioned utility lines in the Red Rock National Conservation Area were found on her computer. She had thoroughly studied the area of the old Blue Diamond Quarry and, most importantly, had purposefully downloaded architectural plans of that very redstone underground facility where she was later found chained to a water pipe. Nenah knew about this remote concrete bunker long before she allegedly became its helpless captive. The next piece in this chilling mosaic was put together by the Police Financial Audit Department. Investigators meticulously analyzed every cent in Nenah Lee's bank accounts for the period from February to May 2015. The young woman's financial history turned into a documented chronicle of cold-blooded and professional preparation. 3 months before her staged disappearance, Nenah began methodically withdrawing all her money. She did this exclusively through small transactions, strictly adhering to cash limits so that the bank's security system would not freeze the accounts due to suspicious financial activity. After withdrawing her life savings, she began operating through a complex chain of drop boxes rented under fictitious names in various parts of Las Vegas. Investigators tracked down shipping invoices from private transport companies. It turned out that the woman had secretly ordered an entire arsenal of high-tech equipment for long-term self-sufficient survival. The delivery lists included powerful portable solar panels, heavy-duty industrial locks with titanium pins, and modern chemical water purification systems. But what struck the detectives most were the receipts for bulk food purchases. Nenah had bought a huge shipment of top-tier military dry rations and premium-quality canned goods. The volume of this order was mathematically calculated to provide exactly 1 year of comfortable sustenance. These indisputable facts left no room for alternative theories. Nenah hadn't bought batteries at the gas station just for a hike through the canyon. Her disappearance was a brilliantly planned operation. But Detective Harris faced a new, puzzling problem. When medics evacuated Nenah from the Redstone bunker, no solar panels, water purification systems, or supplies of gourmet food were found there. The girl was sitting in an empty, damp concrete bunker next to a few cheap tin cans. Where had all that bulky equipment and tons of provisions gone? There was only one logical answer. That filthy room the astonished climbers had seen was merely a flawlessly constructed theatrical set for a single actor. The real lair must have been hidden somewhere very close by. Realizing the true scale of this deception, Detective Mark Harris immediately called in a special technical team of experts. Dozens of police officers, equipped with powerful industrial ground-penetrating radar and demolition tools, urgently set off into the desolate wilderness toward the old Blue Diamond quarry. They descended once again into the same musty room of the Redstone Technical Station. The hum of electronic scanners pierced the silence of the old underground chamber. The operators began slowly scanning every square inch of the mold-covered concrete walls, searching for structural anomalies or hidden cavities. Suddenly, one of the technicians examining the far wall raised his hand sharply, ordering the team to freeze. With eyes wide open, he stared at his monitor screen, where sensitive sensors had just detected something that simply could not exist, according to the blueprints of this monolithic rock. The police operation in the old Blue Diamond quarry had entered its decisive phase. At the end of May 2016, dozens of experienced homicide detectives and forensic specialists descended once again into the dark, musty concrete cavern. The very place where just recently Nenah Lee had been found chained to a pipe. This time, law enforcement officers had not come to search for traces of a mythical kidnapper in a tactical mask, but to find irrefutable evidence of a massive fraud. The hum of highly sensitive industrial ground-penetrating radars echoed monotonously off the cold concrete walls of the old underground chamber. The technicians methodically scanned every massive slab, inch by inch. Suddenly, one of the sensors detected a completely impossible structural anomaly. Deep behind the seemingly monolithic rear wall, which, according to old municipal blueprints, was supposed to rest firmly against solid bedrock, the device clearly indicated the presence of a large cavity. This wall turned out to be a masterfully constructed forgery. The commander of the technical unit immediately ordered the obstacle to be dismantled. Officers, armed with heavy steel sledgehammers and powerful cordless jackhammers, began methodically smashing the partition. When the first thick layer of concrete and brick crashed to the floor with a thunderous roar, raising a thick cloud of acrid gray dust, something completely unexpected appeared in the breach. The entire inner surface of this false panel was extremely tightly lined with a thick layer of professional acoustic foam and special soundproofing mats. It was this incredibly expensive building material that perfectly absorbed any vibrations and sounds from within, turning the room into a completely soundproof bunker. After widening the opening to the size of a full-size doorway, the detectives turned on their powerful tactical flashlights and stepped extremely cautiously into the unknown territory. What lay hidden behind the soundproof wall finally and irrevocably shattered the illusion of an unfortunate victim barely surviving in inhuman conditions. Before the stunned investigators lay a spacious, perfectly dry and clean room that had absolutely nothing in common with the cold prison cell of a cruel maniac. It was an extremely comfortable, meticulously planned, and impeccably equipped shelter, designed for an exceptionally long period of self-sufficient living. In the right-hand corner stood a modern gasoline generator, professionally connected to a complex homemade ventilation system that vented dangerous exhaust fumes through old utility shafts far out to the surface of the canyon. Nearby were neatly arranged battery packs from the very solar panels which the girl had secretly ordered before her official disappearance. On wide metal shelves, in perfectly even rows, stood inexhaustible supplies of expensive freeze-dried food, top-tier military rations, water purification systems, and even premium coffee. In the very center of the room stood a comfortable bed, and on the desk lay a modern laptop next to an entire library of entertainment literature. The missing tourist hadn't spent a whole year sitting in the dark on a cold floor. She had lived here in complete, absolute comfort. However, the perfect atmosphere of this underground shelter was disrupted by one extremely eerie element. Right on the floor, between the bed and the shelves of provisions, lay a large oblong object. It was wrapped extremely carefully in thick industrial tarpaulin and securely tied with nylon ropes using professional knots. In the dry, cool air of the bunker, the smell of biological decomposition was barely noticeable in the background. When the forensic experts took out their scalpels, carefully cut the ropes, and slowly peeled back the edges of the heavy tarpaulin, they saw the body of an extremely stocky man. The specific microclimate of the deserted underground chamber had led to the deep mummification of the remains, preserving the facial features and the skin on the fingers. This dead man matched the description of that very mythical masked sadist about whom Nenah Lee had spoken so convincingly and with genuine tears to national television networks, perfectly, down to the smallest detail. The body was immediately placed in a sealed bag and transported to the Clark County Main Morgue for a detailed autopsy and official identification. Thanks to well-preserved fingerprints, the police computer database instantly returned an accurate result. The deceased turned out to be Michael Trent, a notorious local repeat offender with an extremely extensive and violent criminal history. His long rap sheet included dozens of arrests for armed assaults, racketeering, and brutal extortion of businessmen. However, a real shock awaited the investigators after receiving the findings from the chief medical examiner. The autopsy of Michael's body categorically and unequivocally ruled out death from a heart attack, an infectious disease, or even a simple gunshot wound. No signs of physical struggle were found on his skin or bones. The fatal answer lay quietly hidden in the results of an extensive toxicological analysis of his blood and tissues. In Michael Trent's body, pathologists discovered a massive, absolutely lethal dose of highly toxic oleander extract. This is an extremely beautiful but incredibly poisonous ornamental shrub that municipal services plant en masse in landscaping along Las Vegas's tourist streets. Anyone could easily have picked its leaves during an evening stroll through the city. Chemical analysis allowed doctors to determine the exact time of death for the violent repeat offender. Michael Trent died of heart muscle paralysis about a month and a half before that May Day when two rock climbers accidentally heard a rhythmic tapping and broke the lock off the bunker door. This cold medical fact made lead detective Mark Harris freeze, staring at the photographs spread out on the table. If the sole suspect in the kidnapping had been dead and wrapped in a tarp for over 45 days, then who had been bringing the girl fresh drinking water every week? Who had thrown the key to the lock into a deep ventilation shaft, from which it was physically impossible to retrieve? And the greatest mystery of all, the one that haunted the entire police department. Who exactly had personally, with incredible force, chained Nenah Lee's left leg to a concrete wall in a dark, cold chamber? The investigation had finally reached the final frontier, beyond which lay a truth that, with its absolute, inhuman cold-bloodedness, was far more terrifying than any legend of a desert monster. Early June 2016, interrogation room number 4 at the Las Vegas Police Department headquarters. The air here was icy due to the constant operation of a powerful industrial air conditioner, and the walls, painted a dull gray, seemed to exert psychological pressure from all sides. Behind a massive metal table, handcuffed with steel cuffs to a special built-in ring, sat Nenah Lee. she was still desperately trying to play her perfect role as a completely broken, deeply traumatized victim. Her shoulders were submissively slumped, her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes constantly filled with copious tears every time someone passed through the heavy door. But when the metal latch clicked and Detective Mark Harris, the lead detective from the Homicide Division, slowly entered, the atmosphere in the room changed forever. Harris didn't say a single word of greeting. According to the official police video recording of the interrogation, he silently walked over to the table, opened a thick cardboard folder, and began methodically, one by one, laying out color forensic photographs in front of the girl. First, photos of a camouflaged false panel in the Redstone underground bunker were laid out on the table. Then, detailed photos of an extremely comfortable shelter with a working gasoline generator, perfect rows of expensive freeze-dried food supplies, a modern laptop, and a mini library. Next was a comprehensive toxicology report from the medical laboratory. And finally, the last item placed on the cold metal, right before Nenah's tearful eyes, was a clear photograph of Michael Trent's mummified body, tightly wrapped in thick industrial tarpaulin. The police officers, who were watching the interrogation extremely closely through a two-way mirror from the adjacent darkened room, later noted in their official reports a truly striking metamorphosis in the suspect. In a single brief second, the glistening tears on Nenah Lee's face instantly dried up. Her shoulders slowly straightened, her breathing became deep and steady, and her gaze ceased to be frightened. The mask of the unfortunate, intimidated captive fell away without a trace, finally revealing the true face of a completely cold-blooded, calculating predator. Detective Harris laid out before her every single piece of this complex criminal puzzle, which, after long months of blind searches, had finally come together into a single, incredibly horrific picture. Nenah Lee had never in her life been the victim of any maniac. As irrefutably proven by recent financial reports, access logs to restricted municipal databases recovered by the cyber police, and the gruesome trophies found in a rusty box, she and the local violent repeat offender, Michael Trent, had been working for years as a perfect, deadly criminal duo. Their joint scheme was flawless in its cynical cruelty and left their victims absolutely no chance of survival. Nenah, skillfully utilizing her sharp analytical mind and official, completely unrestricted access to the archival documents of the Canyon Crest Historical Foundation, served as the mastermind and coordinator of the crimes. She spent hours studying specialized travel forums and visitor registration lists at Nevada's national parks, methodically seeking out the most ideal targets. She was interested exclusively in wealthy solo travelers who came to the state from afar and planned extended hikes on the most remote, wild trails, where no other travelers had set foot for weeks. Michael Trent, with his immense physical strength, complete lack of empathy, and extensive prison experience with extortion, was the perfect, brutal enforcer. When the chosen victim found themselves in a deeply isolated canyon, dozens of miles from the nearest cell service, Michael would set up an ambush. According to data reconstructed by the investigation, they would suddenly attack tourists, tightly bind them, and subject them to inhuman torture right amidst the scorching desert rocks. The goal of this torture was always the same: to break the victim's will, obtain all secret passwords for banking apps, and force the victim to voluntarily transfer absolutely all their funds to a long chain of anonymous offshore accounts. As soon as the electronic funds were successfully transferred and the balance hit zero, the need for the captives vanished instantly. The bodies of the murdered travelers were cold-bloodedly dumped into incredibly deep, abandoned ventilation shafts from the gold rush era, unknown to anyone whose exact coordinates Nenah had meticulously copied in advance from old classified municipal blueprints. This lucrative, bloody business had operated flawlessly for several years, leaving behind on the desert surface only cars abandoned in parking lots and the completely empty bank accounts of travelers who were forever classified as missing. But in the spring of 2015, their perfect mechanism suffered a serious breakdown. Police detectives, investigating yet another mysterious disappearance of a tourist along the route, found circumstantial evidence that for the first time clearly pointed to Michael Trent. He began to be summoned more and more frequently for intense interrogations at the police station, and round-the-clock covert surveillance was set up outside his home. Realizing that the steel ring of justice was inescapably tightening with each passing day, and that her brutal but intellectually limited partner was on the verge of breaking under the pressure of experienced investigators, Nenah devised a truly ingenious plan for her escape. She decided to vanish so spectacularly and tragically that the police across the country would search for her only as an unfortunate victim, not as the prime suspect in a series of murders. Masterfully staging her own abduction in the dangerous Icebox Canyon, she vanished into thin air. That same night, she and Michael slipped unnoticed underground into the Redstone Technical Bunker, prepared in advance and fully equipped, securely cutting themselves off from the rest of the world with a thick, soundproof wall. They lived in absolute safety and comfort for nearly a year, spending the stolen money via a secure internet connection. But Nenah, having calculated the logistics and security, failed to account for a single critical factor: the unstable psyche of her accomplice. Michael Trent was an ordinary street criminal who had spent his entire life accustomed to constant movement, hard liquor, and cheap entertainment in the noisy bars of Las Vegas. Life in a cramped concrete bag, completely isolated from sunlight, despite the expensive freeze-dried food and internet access, began to slowly drive him mad. According to a thorough psychological profile later compiled by criminologists based on Michael's chaotic notes found in the basement, his aggressive paranoia grew rapidly with each passing month. He became uncontrollable, barely slept, and began openly clashing with Nenah over every little thing. Eventually, his frayed nerves snapped completely. He began openly and harshly blackmailing his partner. According to investigators who analyzed the dynamics of their relationship, Michael threatened daily that he was tired of hiding like a rat deep underground. He promised to come out into the open, go straight to the district attorney's main office, and turn Nenah in, along with all her archived diagrams and passwords, in exchange for the status of a key witness, state protection, and a significant reduction in his own prison sentence. For a man who had spent years planning perfect murders with mathematical precision, this was a direct death sentence. The cold-blooded Nenah Lee had absolutely no intention of handing over her own life and freedom to the dirty hands of an unstable repeat offender who had lost control of himself. She solved this critical problem just as radically, silently, and cruelly as all her previous problems in the desert. The girl simply waited calmly until evening and added a pre-prepared, lethal, and carefully calibrated dose of toxic oleander extract to his large portion of hot dinner. As the poison began to irreversibly destroy Michael's heart muscle, causing him to choke, Nenah sat silently nearby and watched his final death throes on the bunker floor. After his death, she wrapped his heavy body incredibly carefully in thick industrial tarpaulin, professionally tied it with nylon ropes, and simply pushed it into the far corner of the room so it wouldn't get in her way. But now, sitting in the interrogation room across from Detective Harris, her completely empty, black gaze revealed what frightened the experienced police officer the most. Harris felt a cold sweat run down his back. He realized clearly the poisoning of her partner was merely the simplest stage of her diabolical plan. Left completely alone in a dungeon locked from the inside with a slowly decomposing corpse, Nenah urgently needed to find a way out so she could once again secure her status as an unquestionable, saintly victim in the eyes of society. The police officer understood that to achieve this goal and create such a perfect illusion of captivity, she had to do to her own body what no normal person would ever dare to do. Left in complete isolation, deep underground, alone with Michael Trent's cold body, Nenah Lee found herself facing an uncompromising reality. The girl, with her outstanding analytical mind, understood perfectly well that the vast resources of their refuge were by no means limitless. Sooner or later, the expensive supplies of freeze-dried food, dry rations, and purified drinking water would inevitably run out. It was physically impossible to remain forever in this concrete bag isolated from the world. She desperately needed to get to the surface. But simply opening the heavy metal door from the inside, gathering her things, and quietly leaving would mean making a fatal mistake. That action would instantly make her the prime suspect in the brutal murder of her accomplice and a whole series of bloody attacks on tourists. She needed a truly triumphant return to society, a return with the unshakable status of an absolutely innocent, defenseless, and deeply traumatized victim. It was at this very moment, in the stifling silence of the underground hideout, that Nenah Lee set about carrying out the final, most twisted and cynical act of her criminal charade. According to the forensic investigators, who later pieced together her actions bit by bit, the girl acted with chilling calculation. First, she gathered all the carefully preserved trophies from their past crimes. The driver's licenses of the murdered travelers, scratched wristwatches, and faded Polaroid photos. She folded all of this incredibly neatly into a small metal box. This step was truly ingenious in its simplicity. If the police discovered Michael's body, this inconspicuous box was meant to unequivocally pin him as the sole sadistic maniac. Nenah herself was to appear merely as his latest captive. But in order for experienced detectives and qualified doctors to believe her tragic story, she had to look the part. Nenah began to deliberately and ruthlessly destroy her body. For weeks on end, she consciously starved herself, refusing the abundant supplies of food that stood in neat rows on the shelves just behind the disguised soundproof wall. She consumed only a microscopic amount of water, bringing her body to a state of critical exhaustion and severe dehydration. The girl literally turned herself into a living skeleton so that her appearance would, from the very first second, evoke primal horror and deep compassion in the rescuers. When her physical condition reached a critical point, she took an irreversible step. Nenah dragged a dirty foam mattress into the main part of the bunker. She wrapped a steel chain around her left ankle with her own hands, chaining herself tightly to a massive water pipe. Then she threw the only key to the padlock straight into the narrow ventilation grate. The key flew into the shaft, from which it was impossible to retrieve it. There was no turning back. the entire plan was strictly tied to the time of year. Nenah did all this in May. She knew for certain that May was the peak season for extreme rock climbing. She had calculated with absolute precision that people were guaranteed to appear in that area. All she had to do was wait. In the fall of 2016, an incredibly high-profile trial began, which the entire country watched in shock. National TV networks interrupted their regular programming for live broadcasts. The public, which had recently raised thousands of dollars for the rescued captive, now watched in horror as prosecutors dismantled her legend. The girl, who had been considered a symbol of an unbroken spirit, turned out to be the most terrifying predator. As the final verdict was announced, life imprisonment in a maximum security prison without the possibility of parole, silence fell over the courtroom. Nenah's face remained completely calm, her eyes cold and empty. She did not utter a single word of remorse. And so our dive into the dark secrets of the national park comes to an end. This chilling story has proven once and for all that the most terrifying monster is far from always hiding in the darkness of underground caves. Sometimes it stares directly at its rescuers with the wide, tearful eyes of the perfect victim. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. Be careful in the wilderness. Let your loved ones know your route. And remember that real life can sometimes be scarier than any thriller. Take care, give this a like, and see you soon on the channel.